All right, we made it. Jason, how you doing? Can you
Hey.
hear me?
There we go. I think we're good. You guys hear me?
Yes, it's working.
Great. I can
All
hear you.
right, so 4:04, it's perfect time to get started. We feel like we're ready.
4:04 Central Time.
Sorry, I'm on Central Time. My brain always kind of, this
Nice.
is a good time to kind of start and introduce myself. As Becky mentioned, my name is Chris McIntyre. I serve as external relations specialist. What that basically means is I work with a lot of our partners, mostly employers as well as alums, pretty much anyone that wants to be involved with Wentworth. I do work remotely 365 days of the year, so sometimes my brain is thinking Central Time because I'm based in Minnesota when it's actually Eastern Time. So I'm always 1 hour behind in my head. But 5:04 Eastern Time, 4:04 Central Time. So good time to begin. So I noticed we have Becky here as well. Becky, did you want to just say a little bit of hello while you're here? Because I know you can't stay for the entire session, but I'd love to have you just say hello and introduce yourself in case there's anyone who hasn't met you, but I doubt it.
Yes, well, Jason and I have spoken on the phone, but we haven't seen each other's faces. So hello, Jason. I am the
Hello.
face behind the name Becky Smith. I'm delighted that we're doing this. You know, we've between co-ops and careers and the industrial design department for a long time, we've continued to talk about different ways we can bring together alumni and students. I think that the department does a really good job. Industrial design department does a really good job, and we're complementing that now with a series of sessions where we bring alumni in to speak with us. Especially good timing right now when we can ask questions from the real world. What's it out like there in your industry with COVID-19 in the mix? So thrilled to do this today. I'm not going to stay for that long because I actually have an evening job as a contact tracer with Massachusetts and with Partners in Health. It just became so compelling to me, and I said, I want to do something. I have no sewing skills, but I can talk to people. So I'm about to go back to my side gig in a few minutes, but definitely wanted to kick this off with everyone. I hope students, that you have some good questions. I'm sure Jason has a wealth of information. And please, I would invite you, feel free to ask anything. Jason understands where you're at. He was a student at Wentworth. He was in situations where he was stressed about finding jobs, and he got the same training that you have. So it's really a phenomenal opportunity, and I would just say, just don't worry about what it looks like or what it sounds like. Take advantage of this. I believe strongly in this type of thing. So.
Thank you, Becky. And I agree, and I just want to echo that. So kind of is a nice segue into just kind of the beginnings of this. So a couple things. So first and foremost, 16 is a good number, but it's also not too big where we shouldn't feel comfortable asking questions. So feel free to use the chat function. Feel free just to raise your hand if you have a question. And I encourage any and all questions. So the way we originally planned this was to kind of have the first 30 to 45 minutes where I would ask Jason some questions kind of about his experience, how his work, and how it's being impacted by COVID-19, but we plan to cover a lot of different topics, so we're not going to stay on one specific thing. So the last 15 minutes we earmarked for Q&A from the audience, but really, in the meantime, during our conversation, if there's something that pops up into your head, feel free to interrupt us. I'm okay with that, or just put it on the little chat box, and we'll be happy to kind of answer anything as we go along. Does that sound good? All right, any questions before we begin? Perfect. So I'd actually like to give the guest of honor an opportunity to kind of introduce himself. I know a lot of you already know him or some of his background, but Jason, would you mind kind of going over some of your background, your experience, just to get everybody on the same page in terms of who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Jason Cornaro. I graduated 2013 in industrial design, and since then I've just been kind of trying to figure it out. I definitely haven't had to deal with a pandemic going into it, but it's a strange industry to get involved in. I mean, I got into it because I wanted to do shoes. Now I don't do shoes, or I do shoes sometimes. And it's just one of those things where, you know, I have friends doing everything from toys to not even industrial design anymore, to just kind of product creation in general. So what I did is I went to Wentworth. I went through the co-op program. I found myself at Reebok Advanced Concepts, which is their kind of innovation department. And the way I found myself there was through networking by knocking on people's doors. I kind of vaguely knew that I knew someone that his dad worked in shoes. I didn't know what he did or who he was, but they lived down the street from my parents. So I went and knocked on their door and asked for a tour. And he called my bluff immediately because I was a college kid talking about, hey, what do you do for your job? And that started off internships for me. And it was that quickly just to get a contact, because worst I was going to get from it was a conversation, hey, I do this and it's fun, or, and go away. So I've always kind of taken shots like that to find jobs. But I went from Reebok to, I kind of put all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. And they had a big hiring freeze once I graduated. So not a pandemic, but I was kind of, the only job market I had exposed myself to through all of college was closed right when I graduated. So thankfully, through my co-op advisor, he, or not my co-op, I guess that's what he's called, but my boss in the co-op, he encouraged me to stick with product. He kind of broke it down to its lowest common denominator and said, you want to make products. So if you can't find a design job, or there's no design that appeals to you, look into product management, product development, product anything. And if you can get an advantage that way, then you kind of can find your way into designing stuff. He had some words about designers being a waste of money and saying the only good ones are ones that know what they're talking about. But and he meant it as a joke, but it really was. It kind of set me off being like, okay, great, I'm a designer, but what else can I do? How can I, if I'm not going to if the market's kind of closed coming right out of school, how am I going to find a way into creating product? So I became a product manager, did product management, development, got back into design because I could brand myself to smaller companies saying, hey, you need a product manager who can also design, or hey, if I'm doing the design work, I can also do testing, or just making yourself a little bit more useful in a different way. So for the past several years, I kind of bounced between management, development, and design in all different kind of types of roles. And then the calling kind of struck again, where I just wanted to go back into designing stuff. So I really, shifted focus, worked with my employer to find a way to become a designer again. And then since September, I've been freelancing in different capacities. And I'm still trying to figure it out. I made a couple industry changes. So I've been doing design engineering for a medical device company, which is not design, but I wanted to prove that I could work on medical devices. And they didn't have an opportunity for someone who could sketch stuff or who could draw things, but they needed SolidWorks done quickly. So I've been learning how to work directly with engineers, and now I've been seeking out medical companies saying, hey, I know what goes on behind the scenes. No, I haven't designed a product, but here's something that I had manufactured. And it's just been a lot of kind of figuring it out as it goes, and that, seeing where my friends that I graduated with went. There's no right answer with a design degree. Some people are not even designing toys, they're making games. Some people are making the hinges inside of laptops instead of the laptop itself. And some people are working on services and apps and things like that. And it's all about, most of the companies that hire you can't define what you do anyway, and it's just finding a way to prove to them that you're useful. And that's kind of been what I've chased so far.
So I definitely want to get back to talking about working from freelancing, and kind of sounds like you started freelancing in like September, that time frame, and definitely how it's changed now with what's going on. But I want to go back to one of the very first things you said, which I didn't actually know this about you, but you got your co-op, you said you knocked on a neighbor's door, essentially.
Yeah, and he
that's something that I know Becky and the rest of the advisors, we talk about this networking piece a lot. And you probably are pretty sick and tired of us talking about it. So that's I think huge and a good example of networking. So can you kind of go back to the very beginning in your co-op search and talk about that networking piece of it? It had to be kind of intimidating, or at least a little bit scary to do. An undergraduate college student knocking on the door of someone who works at Reebok, trying to network their way into a co-op. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and he ended up being the guy who invented the pump. He ended up being the head of the department. So it really worked.
The shoe pump?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, so it really worked out. I still do work for him and with him, which is another great thing. But I didn't know that. I had no idea who he was. But I think because of the stakes being so high or whatever it wasn't intimidating because I didn't know, and the worst I was going to get is good luck. I don't think I was going to get insulted. I didn't think I was going to get hired, but in my own time, I was willing to drive down to, they're now in Boston, but Canton on a Tuesday and just say, hey, can I walk around your shoe company for a little bit? So I think as a student and even now as someone freelancing just looking for work, being told no isn't a big deal. People will either say, oh, he was trying to find a job and we really appreciate that, but we can't hire him, or they'll just say no thank you. Or you might get a tour. I could have left and gotten to walk around, gotten to see like Yao Ming's shoes or whatever interesting things they had, and then went home. And it's so I wasn't taking a chance because I wasn't going to burn any bridges by seeming like someone who wanted a job. So I think people want to be asked.
So now let's fast forward to today and kind of what you've been doing. So can you talk about the changes from when you were working kind of at different organizations versus freelancing, at least when you started to freelance versus what's now? So can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
I'm still, so as a freelancer, I only really have, and we can talk about this too as part of the coronavirus response, but I got really lucky that I kind of got almost trapped with a freelance role because there's a medical emergency going on and I'm at a medical startup. So I haven't in my freelance career to do too much searching for gigs and stuff. I've done a couple one-off jobs, and everything else has been through networking. So and I kind of already lost track of the question.
I was just talking about the transition from organizations to freelance work, and if it was a tough transition and kind of what you've learned.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the transition itself is you don't realize, one of the reasons why I wanted to try freelancing is because I've always had an atypical work schedule. I've always worked best on my own sometimes and with teams other times, and just really wanting to, I didn't like having to show up at, be in the office at 8 a.m. and that's all different now because you might not need to, but if I'm going to be designing a thing, if I don't need meetings, I want to be able to do it on my own terms, and that was my attempt. And you don't realize that although your job feels like it's trapping you in a corporate job or in a 9-to-5 job, once you break out of that, there's a lot of securities that you're shielded from as a regular employee that the first week you're like, oh great, I'm starting work at 6 p.m. I'll go to bed at 2 and I'll sleep until 11. This is great. And then all of a sudden you need to pay your own health insurance and you have to go find that second gig and you have to do stuff like that. So for that stuff where you're negotiating benefits packages and being like, ooh, how many vacation days do I get? Week 1 of freelancing, you're like, I have unlimited vacation days. And by week 2, you're like, okay, if I don't work 8 days this week, then I can't do this, that, or the other thing. And it's great in the fact that, if you have a job lined up, or if you can, if you have the gig, if you have the people you're working for and you can freelance reliably, it becomes this, set your own schedule, get the work done, you're not micromanaged type of environment. But the second you need to go look for work, or you don't know what the project for next week is or something like that, all of a sudden it's a kind of, I don't know, you start panicking a little bit, you start kind of, all of those comforts become your fault. When you have a boss, if there's if it's light at work, then their job is to find something to keep you busy with. But when you're your own boss and you need to go actively recruit yourself for a job at someone else's company, it becomes stressful when you have 24 free hours in a day.
Sorry, I was muted. I did one of those full pause. My apologies. So can you talk a little bit about how your work has shifted because of COVID-19? Like, can you walk us through the timeline of all of a sudden things were going along, you were doing your thing, and then all of a sudden in mid to late March, COVID-19 hits and everything's just kind of changed. So I know that students are definitely experiencing quite a bit of change in just the last 3 months. how was the transition from you, and what were the first signs you noticed, and what did you do? What were kind of the stages of grief? Were you upset? Were you excited? So how has it changed everything that you do? Because I'm guessing that it has.
Oh, a ton. So for me, I mean, I've been working out of a, the client that I've been working at for close to 40 hours a week, every week, mostly in their office, is in like a WeWork type of kind of co-working space, with everything from technology companies to food companies to everything in there. So it was kind of a strange thing where it started turning into a ghost town, and you realize like, oh, this company's taking it seriously, and they're in the office next door to us. So it was strange in terms of just the fact that everyone was panicking. But I've been working in a room with 3 engineers, or mostly 2 engineers, who are building circuit boards next to me. One of them's doing the software engineering, and we're bumping elbows. And I'm doing a new thing for myself. So I'm doing medical, which I've never done before. And I'm doing, like I said, the design engineering part. So it's all to, this is going directly to the factory. It needs to pass the test. It needs to hit all of these, actual materials and manufacturing concerns. So I've had an engineer at my fingertips for 5 months every day. Any question I have, anything that needs math, they're there. And now I'm, across the state from them, working on their complex things by myself that are, several hundred piece assemblies. And just asking a question becomes different. You have to find ways to efficiently get it across to them. You have to find ways to keep yourself busy, because you don't know if they're out walking their dog or something, and you don't want to wait 2 hours for an answer and not be able to work during it. And it just, the entire communication and collaboration just shifts. We used to sit at desks next to each other and kind of sketch while we're talking, and you can't do that anymore. Everything you communicate, you kind of have to package up and send off like it's a letter. Let them open it, interpret it themselves, and send it back to you. So learning how to communicate, I don't understand how this piece connects to this piece. It's no longer, in an office, they could just go, oh, it's like this, and here are my hands, and that's exactly what it looks like. But now they have to like take a picture of their hands and send it to you, or find a way to illustrate, just so to put an angle on something. So yeah, it shifted it completely. At the same time, it's been great, because I don't need to be, I don't need to ask those questions at the exact hours they're in the office. So everything shifted from kind of going by, I don't know, we worked hourly, and now we work daily in terms of communication and interaction.
And so it sounds like, kind of reading between the lines of what you're saying, would it be fair to say that you've kind of looked at this, and while it's definitely presented some challenges, you've also gained some really new skills, or at least sharpened some skills like communication? Would that be accurate to say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure when we get back into the, interactions, my skills at talking face to face will have declined to make up for it. But yeah, it's just, I mean, as a working industrial designer in consumer electronics and consumer products, you're sending, when you're working with China, when you're working with a factory, you're kind of sending all of your ideas in a package to them, mostly visually with some words, and they unpack it. Now you kind of have to do that for your coworkers and colleagues, where, end of the day, here's a package, like, let's discuss this tomorrow. And it's less formal, because we're all wearing, most of us are probably wearing pants, but we're all, at home in our pajamas. So it's less formal in that way, but at the same time, all of your communications have to be more formal and more, here's a spreadsheet of what I'm talking about, versus a little note on a Post-it note. Yeah.
So kind of thinking along those lines, how do you anticipate not only your work, but also kind of the bigger industrial design world? How do you anticipate it changing, or how's it going to look different once things go back to normal, quote unquote? How is it going to be permanently impacted because of this and the changes before COVID-19? Once COVID-19, there's a vaccine or it passes or whatever, it's probably going to be altered pretty significantly. So how do you anticipate that in terms of your work changing when things get back to a even level?
So I've had the displeasure of working for a lot of places that are very unfriendly to working from home. So I think that's going to change. I think in general, you know, the remote work isn't going to be looked on as poorly. I think people are going to start, you know, building their own little mini shops and using, you know, I belong to a maker space up until COVID-19. And, you know, I don't really want to go into that basement full of public buttons right now. So I think it's, you know, I don't know if there's going to be, especially with what we do, I hope now that I'm on this side of the fence that there's a bigger call for freelancers, because, you know, there's same way that there's, you know, offices are working remotely in all regards. Like, you might not outsource to a different country, but you could outsource to, you know, if you're a Boston-based company, maybe you just outsource to Boston, and, you know, that designer can come in once every 2 weeks for a meeting. You know, they're not at your fingertips, but they're a phone call away. But it's tough to tell. I mean, I think design language in general is going to come a lot more smooth and wipeable, but I don't really. It's tough to tell because it's everyone's first experiment. I mean, I think I've had some of my best work and some of my best kind of turnaround remotely, which, you know, it tells me, hey, I've been doing a great job, and maybe working outside of the office is better. But I'm sure for every one of me, there's someone who has done a little bit worse out of the office than they would have in the office, and they'll want to go back. So I think it's strange because there is this kind of, you know, people want to go back to normal too, but at the same time, like I don't want to be trapped in an office anymore with 30 people that don't have a meeting that day, or don't need to use those tools that day, and that's what I'm hoping changes. But we're designers and we make physical products, or some of us do. I mean, the UX and UI world too, but, you know, you still need to hand something to someone, and you still need to give that context. And it is really tough to have the first and last discussions about a product when you're not in the room with people. It's tough to, you know, that janky prototype, telling them how to hold it just right to get your idea across, and then that final prototype, you know, presenting it exactly how you want is tough to translate to this.
So thinking about where the attendees of this Zoom session are at right now, most are either doing a co-op search for their final co-op,
Mm-hmm.
or getting ready to graduate and looking at a full-time role. And the landscape looks quite a bit different than when you were getting ready to graduate. Similarities, yes, we kind of mentioned that a little bit, but it's also quite a bit different. So what advice would you tell the students if they're searching either for a co-op or a full-time work? So what can they do? What should they be doing? What's your kind of biggest piece of advice for them, knowing the landscape and knowing what's going on with some of your experience?
I think the biggest advice I have is to reach out to people directly and try and find a direct route to someone related. I think your biggest advantage is showing that you really care about the stuff that you want to work on products, and that you'll work hard. It's strange to say because there's so many job applications and stuff, and you don't necessarily need to know someone. But from applications I've gotten and from just experience doing it the right way and the wrong way, it's no surprise that you're looking for a job to the person who's hiring you. You know, saying you're a student coming out of school, here's my work, but I've always cared about this industry, or I really want that. It's, you know, having that thing that makes you a little different than the generic information, and being willing to have an awkward conversation. I think every job I've gotten has been through some sort of breach of the normal job application process.
That's a good term. That's a good term. Breach of the normal job application.
I mean, I paid the money. I joined a startup out in Seattle, or they moved out to Seattle and then shut down like startups do, and I was stuck there, literally financially and physically stuck there. And I paid the $30 annoying on LinkedIn to be able to annoy people directly. And I was stuck in a city with just me and my dog. I had a compelling story about dog stuff. And I just, you know, with 20 minutes of searching, I found the owner of every dog stuff company in the country. And I paid the money to be able to message them directly. And I found one that had a designer going on maternity leave. And they couldn't give me a full-time job, but they hired me for a contract, and it allowed me to move back home. And, you know, that they didn't even know that they were just going to let the seat be vacant for 3 months while she was out on leave, and then, do nothing. And they weren't going to post a job. They weren't going to hire anyone. But the second the message came through, they're like, oh, good idea. It's only, it's a cheap investment to get some fresh eyes on stuff. And it's annoying because you have to send a lot of letters out into the void. But at the same time, the guy who hired me read my message and he's like, oh, I know what it's like to be stuck with just a dog and just really want to, make that interaction better. Like, can you get here by Wednesday? And the people are going to get piles of stuff. It's standing out is key, and then just contextualizing stuff and sharing it with your friends, showing your portfolio to everyone, because you need to be able to look at your work like you're a stranger. That's the only way you're going to know if it's kind of good or not, because a lot of stuff makes sense to you because you've put, whether it's 2 hours or 40 hours of work into it, you're the only one that's worked on it, so it makes sense to you. So just getting that appeal to people right away, being like, hey, this is what I'm doing, it's explained to a stranger and I really want it, I think are the two kind of the winning combo.
So actually, I was going to mention LinkedIn. That's obviously at least what I recommend LinkedIn quite highly. And you've probably heard Becky or another advisor talk about the benefits of it. Jason, would you say the $30 you mentioned to pay for the premium, was that worth it, would you say?
I mean, I've paid it before and not gotten hired. So it's, and you also don't need to pay it. I mean, but yeah, I think, and I don't keep my LinkedIn profile necessarily top shelf perfect, but having that access to it's free, and it's it's more formal than Facebook and Instagram, and you can send a personal letter to someone, and it's a separate mailbox than their Gmail. So, and you're not invading personal space. They're there for professional networking. So take advantage of it. People are going to get offended if you call their personal phone and say, hey, I want a tour of your footwear job. But if you find a way to not interrupt their day, which LinkedIn's perfect for, and just really put yourself out there, then yeah, I think it's a great resource because the context is already there. No one's on LinkedIn for memes. So, if they see it, they're like, oh, they're looking for a job. That makes sense. We're on LinkedIn.
So do you have any, don't mean to put you on the spot here, but
no, please do.
Do you have any, just curious from the industrial design world, do you have any other resources that you feel like students could use to find some new contacts outside of LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is great. It's intimidating. I'm not an Instagram designer. I'm the least flashy, sketcher or whatever you want to call it possible. But at the same time, like, there's people behind those accounts. Message them. You can still, like, I've still had conversations with great designers about nothing just because I liked what they were posting. I wasn't looking for a job or anything, because you never want to go up to a stranger and say, get me a job. But if you say, hey, that's nice, you start a conversation, you find out they like something you like, and you talk. You're making a friend either way. Like, it's that type of approach. But I'm pretty active, and I spend a lot of time talking with other industrial designers on Discord. Minor details, Nick Baker, he's a famous enough Instagram designer that people have probably seen his stuff. Him and James, and I feel bad because I'm forgetting his last name. James Connor. They run a podcast. It's one of the only industrial design podcasts out there. It's pretty good. I don't love listening about my work, but I like the people, and they have a Discord community, and we just it's just a bunch of designers from all over who are, if you need a tip on CAD, or if you just need to talk about an object that you like, it's a good chat room for that. And I've made some contacts. I've met up with some people. Once you leave school, the world of designers is kind of lonely. There's only one or two in every city. Everyone spreads out. So having just kind of an online resource where they're there 24 hours a day. I mean, like when the PS5 came out, like I didn't have, none of my friends wanted to hear my opinions, but I went straight to the Discord and started complaining. So it's a great resource just to hear what people at all stages of their careers are actively talking about that day.
So it's interesting you mentioned that. So so you mentioned like designers can be kind of a lonely world. It's interesting thinking about, from what I know, the Wentworth Industrial Design community of students and staff and faculty is very, very tight knit. So it's definitely a different perspective when you go away or move to Seattle or wherever, where you're kind of the only one. But that makes a lot of sense. So would you be okay if maybe after our chat, and I have everybody's name on here, so after the chat, would you be okay if you sent some of those through email to me and I could send it?
Absolutely.
Just because instead of taking furious notes like who some of those names were, their organizations, the Discord channel.
Yeah,
So
of course.
it might be good to have it written down, and so we're not all scrambling. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Um,
So we'll be sure to send that after in the next few days. So the Faith actually brought up a good question. So how do you present your portfolio during these situations?
I just use my website. It's an admittedly very okay portfolio. It's just pictures of my work. There's very I don't I've worked a lot of so my portfolio is kind of hidden in my resume too. I've done a lot probably now, and I'm I guess 7 years out. I've probably spent more professional hours as a product developer or product manager. Um, and they all help me as a designer because it's product management and development are kind of the people that tell you no as a designer. So you're working with your own worst enemy, either figuring out, oh, we can't do that because it needs to fit in this size box to go on the shelf, or it needs to cost this much money, or it needs to be, your product management is picking the projects and figuring out the reason why a product should be made, and then kind of how it financially makes sense. Product development is how it's going to be made, where it's going to be made, when we can have it by, and how to make sure that it doesn't explode. So working as both of those, my design process is done in Excel part of the way, just to figure out, whether it's part costs or figuring out how to make stuff for the same amount of money or less. It's things like that, and that's all hidden in my resume, which I think allows me some freedom to have my portfolio just be a picture of, here's the thing I designed, and here it is in a retail box. In general, I think portfolios showing process are great. It's something that I'm actively, now that I am a freelancer, I'm working on it because I've finally hit a road where people want to see that, whether it's they want to see it for proof that they're hiring a flashy designer, or because they were told to look for sketches, or because whatever the reason is, it can't hurt. But at the same time, for me, it's just, how can I make a manufacturable product? And for me, saying that I've worked on as a product manager, developer, and designer tells me, tells the person hiring that, like, okay, yeah, here's some pictures of things they made, plus like they know how to kind of work the corporate end of it.
So actually kind of related to when you were talking about your resume and your portfolio, that led me to another question I was wondering, because we always talk about building your skills, right? At this point, especially if you're getting ready to graduate, you won't be in class anymore. So what are some key skills, whether it's technical skills or even those kind of communication skills you talked about earlier? What would you say are the most in-demand skills that employers are looking for right now that students should really be ensuring that they sharpen or learn if it's a new skill, based on what you're seeing in the industry?
It's such a tough question to answer, because it's dependent on, if a footwear company is going to want different skills than, I mean, the cynical answer is UX, and I hate to say it.
Why do you hate to say that?
Just because I like physical products. I'm right on the edge of where it was like kind of integrated, and yeah, I mean, but also because it's so laughably true. That just the way the market of building new things is full of digital and app ideas that are, for every one physical product that comes out, there's infinitely more UI UX projects. I think the skills, it's really tough to say what skills are more or less in demand. I mean, I think there's a rush to make stuff manufacturable all the time. So figuring out that kind of stuff. We're in a weird place right now with the quarantine and everything, because I think, buying products based on trend and and I'm hoping a lot of the kind of buy it and trash it culture is going away more now that we're all stuck with the crap we own. And because I mean, it's funny, I was I never thought about it, but like a store like TJ Maxx is, you know, they just opened, but they still have their stuff from February. Like, you know, that the whole world missed a season. They missed, you know, winter, spring 2020. It just sat on the shelves. So I don't know if that's going to change things, but a lot of industrial design and a lot of designers do a lot more, you know, there are jobs where you're doing that upkeep on making the product relevant and staying on with the style and stuff like that. And then there's also a completely different market for innovators or people that can tinker really well and make a mechanical thing work. I think either having a broad range of skills and a willingness to learn, or having something you're great at and marketing it, are the two kind of ways to go. For me, I've tried to cast the widest kind of skill net possible, and another part of the reason why I don't have a lot of sketches on my site is because they're just okay. But I try and back that up with other marketable skills and other ways of kind of, you know, becoming a complete designer. And I'm really not I'm not very strong in any one category, you know, which I think is appealing to people that are trying to make a diverse range of stuff, or they're trying to look for kind of someone who can fill that role. But at the same time, my roommate all through college was great at making little devices and tinkering on stuff, and now he's building stuff, you know, the actual components of electronics. And he marketed his building skills as much as I marketed my I'm a product manager skills. So I think it's just trying to find a way to be useful. It was kind of broad as that sounds.
It can be easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah.
Faith has another good question. So do you have a mentor, or did you ever have a mentor when you were at Wentworth, or someone you kind of look up to, talk to, a professional who you can kind of bounce ideas off of?
Yeah, I've always had one. I've always had at least one. They're just friends that know more than you.
That's a good way to put it, friends that know more than you.
So it's really, you know, and my biggest mentor, or someone that I've always used as one, is my first co-op advisor. You know, my first hire, I've just tried to bounce everything off. I mean, he's made a bunch of cool stuff, so why wouldn't I? And you know, that came from building a relationship, both like you would with your boss and like a friend. You know, at work, I was literally taking the long way to the bathroom to walk by his office in case, you know, he would remember me and be like, "Hey, you, do this for me." And at the same time, like, you know, I also, you know, I'm not going to go talk to him about stuff and beg him for jobs, but I know he likes hockey, so let's get a beer and watch hockey. And then, oh, what have you been up to? Oh, I'm just looking for jobs. You know, it goes that way, and having the Instagram community, the Discord community, and having places where you can just access other designers, it's really quick online. Like, I have mentors I've never met. I have designers that people have heard of that I've had conversations with, you know, and you learn from them, and you can reach out to them once you start a rapport. And yeah, every place I've gone, there's always that one like wise person who just kind of knows stuff. You just kind of talk to them. They usually never shut up anyway, so it's pretty easy to find. Pretty easy to find the right ones.
So kind of thinking back, we're running out of time, just the first piece of it. So thinking about your time back at Wentworth, if you could humor me. What are some of your favorite memories at Wentworth? Because I know everyone here is getting ready to graduate. It's usually a time of reflection. What are some really good memories you have at Wentworth, whether it's a class, studio, or just kind of anything else?
I mean, I miss making stuff for, you know, I always took myself too seriously with my projects, which always kind of made them kind of duds to me. I look back and I'm like, oh, I had freedom to make kind of, you know, I had a wood shop, metal shop, I had all this access to everything right in front of me. Like, the time in shop just building stuff. You know, I really miss that. I miss obviously just and I'm saying this to a bunch of college kids that are stuck in their houses, being out in the city with friends.
We all miss that. I think we all.
Yeah, I miss that. You know, that genuine college experience. But really, it's yeah. I miss the open-ended questions. You know, it's tough when you're either in the throes of your thesis project or kind of committed to ideas or have to just finish a project. But yeah, there's a lot more, and it's tough because I'm also a big preacher of learn all this stuff that the other people you work with do, like the product managers and developers and stuff. But every piece of design work I've really done has come with this much larger follow-up process and documentation process and all of the kind of business stuff that actually turns it into a, a real manufacturable project. So I miss from school being able to just, make stuff and move on to the next thing. Which is kind of another driver of this freelancing attempt, is because I just want to work on a project, move to the next thing. I don't want to live with them like you do as a corporate designer. Where you design into a product line and now all of a sudden they need it smaller, they need it a different color, or they need next year's model. I just miss making stuff with reckless abandon till 2 a.m. without having neighbors.
What's been one of the your favorite thing that you've designed or made or built?
I actually, my thesis project for Wentworth, I made a dining table, because I guess apparently I had done shoe related everything up until then. So I wanted to make furniture, and everything I've done since then, I've been telling myself, like, I'm doing this so I can afford enough space to build tables. And I haven't gotten there yet, but I really like, and because I was more sculptural, more art-like, but I don't know, I've done, I don't know if people have kind of looked at my portfolio, but I've done some different markets than most industrial designers. So some of my pride are hidden in bedside tables. Yeah, every project's been really different for me too. I think my favorite project is it's called a tailgate dumpster. It's a dog poop bag that you magnet to the outside of a car. Just because I got paid to do that. And it's useful. Like if you've ever gone hiking at a place that's carry in, carry out, and you have to put a bag of dog poop in your car.
It solves
it's
the problem.
Weird. Yeah, it's uncomfortable to do it, and you can clamp them under the windshield wiper or put them in a Pringles can. But the fact that there was enough market demand, there was enough interest. It was a good marketing piece too, because it was more like, we're going to be the first company to do this dog poop thing, and people are going to love it. But it was fun all the way through, and it was one of the few times I did the full, like, ask people what cars they have and go measure the space on their trunk, and then usually you get all of these things you've learned over 4 years of school. Like, if you've learned 10 different parts of the design process in any project, you're lucky to maybe touch 4 of them between start and end. And again, this is coming from like an in-house corporate type of place, but to actually be able to go do those interviews and then go do the testing and then make the mock-ups, it was just a fun kind of all the way through. Every minute of the project was enjoyable. And I think that also comes from, it's not electric, there's no motors, there's no batteries, there's no fire hazard. So it was really enjoyable just to kind of draw bags that poop would go in.
So I promise,
simple pleasures.
I promised 45 minutes. So I wanted to open it up to the group. Hopefully we'll have some questions. Is there any questions kind of right off the bat?
Sure, and I just discovered this question list.
Oh, it looks like Sandy has a question.
Sandy does.
How is the job market right now? And are companies looking for full-time employees or interns or freelancers?
I don't know. It's strange. I mean, I got really lucky. I can speak for the medical device community or medical stuff. That's still happening. There's more demand than ever for that. There's, and part of it is, the good news of people just really wanting to help. The other part is right now FDA regulations are a little bit more lax and you can push some devices through quicker. There's always a business end, but it's tough because I have, there were a few jobs I was interviewing for that were more in housewares and in, like water bottles, and those disappeared the second, no one's going to go buy no one's looking for a new Nalgene right now. So it's really tough to say. I think as designers, we'll, anytime there's a change in the world, there's always stuff that can make it easier for people or stuff that can kind of influence their experience. So, for example, like masks or face coverings, those are the cliche ones, but for everything that got taken away by being quarantined, the entire way of life is different, and we're the people that design products and solutions for that. So to say who today is hiring, I have no idea. You know, different states, different parts of the country are open and closed. But I know medical and stuff like that, there's definitely a need right now because we're in a medical crisis. And I know that there will be companies looking to capitalize on the fact that our way of life has changed. So whether their industry improves by accident or on purpose, you know, teleconferencing solutions, for example, like they got a bump they weren't expecting. And right now everyone's got like an issue with how they do their webcams and stuff. So there's always industries that are growing and shrinking. So I don't think saying a market's closed is the answer, but no one's probably going to bring you into a small room and interview you right this second.
I'll also plug 3M. They're my neighbors across the street. Actually, they're hiring a lot of N95 masks.
Have they been busy?
Yeah, and you can be my neighbor. You wouldn't want to live out here in the Midwest and be my neighbor. But I like that. You're right. For everything COVID shuts down, there's an opportunity in another market. So I think that's really good advice. We have a good question from John. When you first started freelancing, what were some things you did or methods you followed to stay focused on your work and responsibilities?
I mean, I threw myself in the deep end with it. I think it becomes a really, you know, have you ever handed a project in late or just not done your homework, but someone's paying you to do that work? And if you hand it in late, it really reflects poorly on this business you're trying to start for yourself. I mean, the motivation was easy once the project's there. You know, it's been tougher now that I'm a little more comfortable with it to you know, wait till a little later, or you know, take that really nice day off and work on Sunday instead. Those kind of things. But I mean, in general, it all of a sudden you go from I have all this freedom to I'm my own boss, and you know, you want to treat your only employee well, but at the same time, like you need him to produce, otherwise you're not going to be able to pay him. So I think I think staying focused and getting motivated to do it comes from needing to. And it's if there's a will, there's a way to get it done.
And I actually have a question. This is going to come off very, I've never been a freelancer, so I'm always curious and fascinated by the work. How do you go about finding your opportunities?
Ask everyone, put myself out there, and I'm trying to get better at it. Something I've always been is just a private designer, I guess. I've never had a big social media presence or anything like that. Never really promoted myself too much, and I'm realizing how important stuff like that is. And it's, you know, the same way you try and find a job in general is you try and make connections with people that might be helpful. Advertise that you're looking for work. I've reached out to a lot of places just to see if they're available, and you know, just put yourself in people's minds. You know, if they're not hiring right now, but there's someone likely to hire. My old co-op boss, I've done some freelance work for him in the past couple of months where it just came from, you know, him and someone were having a conversation at a bar about a product that they were trying to make, and they needed a freelancer, and I was most recent in his text message list. You know, being on the top of people's minds, being like, the same way you ask someone, do you know someone that's hiring? If someone asks them, do you know an industrial designer? You want their response to be, oh yeah, I know Jason. Like he's the one, he's freelance. You know, so whatever you can do to get yourself out there so that people, you know, we're a very niche profession. I mean, it's growing, and the world's understanding of it even existing is bigger now than it's ever been. But at the same time, you know, your mom probably only knows one industrial designer. So you do kind of have a built-in network as long as you kind of exclaim to the world, I'm a freelancer and I'm looking for work and here's what I've done. But it's tough, and it's something where I would never have started doing it if I didn't know that I'd have at least one recurring gig. You know, it was kind of a home-based thing, and it still is. This is still an experiment for me. The reason why I got into it and have pursued it in general is 'cause I was leaving my last job, and I knew that if I could keep myself afloat long enough where for the first time I'd be able to pick and choose what I do next. You know, and it may very well be that I continue freelancing and stay this way, but you know, for the first time ever, I don't need to accept one of the first 3 jobs that it, you know, gives me an offer. I can I can kind of tread water for a little bit, find out what's next. There are some consultancies out there. There are some dream jobs that I wouldn't be like, oh no, I'm a freelancer now. Sorry, Nintendo. Stuff like that. But at the same time, like there was a time in my life where I ended up working for a cheap battery-powered women's shaver company for several years, and it wasn't because I had a passion going in. It was because I needed a job by the end of the month. Like, and I checked it out. I had a couple other jobs I was looking into, and that was the one that I figured would be best for me. I didn't just grab it, but at the same time, like, I couldn't wait. Everything you do, you learn something from too. But yeah, it really comes from, there's always work to be found.
So it looks like we have time for one, maybe two more questions, if there's anything
Sure.
else.
I didn't have a question. Derek Cassia wanted me to say hi, Jason.
Oh yes, hello. Yeah, Derek was. I came into industrial design never having taken an art or drawing class or anything, and Derek was my first I think he was adjunct, and he was just doing like the intro to drawing class, like not the drawing class in the summer, but the first ever like drawing one. And he was the best introduction to being a student of industrial design that I could have gotten. I mean, he's that person that shows their work, and it's annoying to see because there's no like hidden hard work in what he does. You actually see him set everything up, and it blows my mind that he does it every single time. But it was a great resource to learn from. And it's funny, through working at Staples, I had some connections to him and made friends in the design department because he was there for a little while. I knew he was a professor. I asked one of the designers there, hey, do you know Derek? And it turns out they're really good friends. And all of a sudden I had a friend who's a designer, and I got to sit in on design meetings and have an input there, even though I was a product manager. And it got me, even that, just knowing someone that knows someone, and you don't go from there to begging them for a job, but you say, oh, cool, Derek was my teacher. Like, and then tomorrow when you say hi at lunch, you have a little bit more to talk about. It grows that way.
Utilize your resources is what I'm hearing.
Yes, and I don't know, everyone I've come into in this field is we make outward facing stuff, so most of us are pretty proud to talk about what we've done to get there and how we've done it. So usually asking a designer a question, honestly, and from a position of I'm a student who's worried about this, or I have these concerns, you're very likely to get a positive response and a probably very talkative answer. So I've always gone by that way.
Any last minute questions for Jason?
Molly owes me one. So
What's that?
Molly Schindler down there, I told her that she owes me a question. So Molly was a co-op of mine. And
Oh, you're on the spot.
I said, she asked what it was going to be, and I said, I think a Q&A, and I'm not sure of what I'm going to talk about, so you need to provide the Q. I didn't know Rachel would be here either, so she owes me one too.
What's in your toolbox for working at home and having an at-home studio? Like, what are things that you can't design without?
I'm a slave to my iPad. That's a really good question, actually. I'm a slave to the iPad. I think at this point, having something you can draw on digitally and share, whether it's any type of tablet, is a crucial ingredient. Also, just from a drawing stuff in general, I spend a lot less time screwing around because I just take a picture of something that's vaguely shaped, like the thing I want to design, and trace over it in perspective. I think something that's awesome is just you can buy a 3D printer for $200. I've built more stuff around the house than industrial design stuff, but at the same time, I've been toying around with like launching little tiny small business things, and having a printer allows me to prototype and just I just touched a button, just lives right there on the shelf. So $180, and it's a great resource.
Where'd you get that? So where could any of us?
The internet.
Just the internet.
Reality Ender.
It is. It's the Ender 3.
Yeah, same. That
and
one
I mean,
was
yeah, it's like $180. It works when you get it. You can put some cheap upgrades into it, and it's just one of those things where like one, if you buy it and build it, you need to use it, or you feel terrible if you don't. But the other part is that, you know, that you have all those ideas like, oh, if I could build it, I'd make it. And it takes away those excuses. So yeah, I think having something to prototype with is crucial from home, because you're like having to go into a place just to print a thing doesn't seem like it's sustainable in 2020. Yeah, thank you, Molly.
Good. 4:59. Any other questions?
How's Omar?
Rachel's asking about my dog. He's great. But actually, as a better topic,
Your dog. I've seen your dogs in your photo and like LinkedIn.
Yeah, I don't. No one's taken a picture of me without him. That's why he's like my headshot. Like I need it. But Rachel's also just a Rachel and Molly, both co-ops of mine. Rachel is a great example of a co-op who's both of them are. Rachel is currently actually helping me in another volunteer type of thing where she's I'm trying to get her to be called a junior designer, so it sounds better when you come out of coronavirus.
Intern, but I'm not.
Yeah, I didn't correct him. You're not the intern. We're working on for a nonprofit called the Ventilator Project.
Oh yeah.
And it came both from me knowing that there are some college students that are kind of in a weird place right now, ending the year and needing someone with a valid key shot license. Kidding, Rachel, you're good at other stuff too. But just staying in touch and having that contact, like I needed someone who could be a little helpful a couple nights a week or whatever, and you know, having a contact, I was able to reach out to her, and it's you know, sorry everyone else, but it's just, you know, someone, they're on the top of your mind when you need, you know, who's looking for work in the Boston area that can work a couple hours or whatever. And I was like, oh, Rachel can do it. And for me, I'm doing this volunteer work because I, one, care, but also because I know coming into interviews and coming to jobs, people are going to ask you, what were you doing during coronavirus? You know, and 90% of the world is going to be able to say Netflix, you know, or whatever. Like it's hard to be productive. So whether it's, I made a little, and it's on my portfolio and it's on Instagram, but I made a little wallet company in September just to make something, try and test out Etsy and running my own website and stuff like that. And little things like that, it cost me $40 to start the company in terms of buying leather and stuff like that. But it's one of those things that if I was hiring after a pandemic or whatever, and people had a kind of big lull, and I saw two equal people, and one of them was like, oh, I tried to make something. You know, it says that you stay busy. It says that you're self-motivated and you're not necessarily just doing it because you need the money, you know? So I think staying busy during this is probably the biggest asset any of you can have. It's just finding a way to apply your studies and trade while the world's kind of quiet.
Which I'm sure is difficult. Can be pretty difficult to do, especially
it's difficult, but there's always a, you know, and it's one of those things where I had the product idea, I just needed a wallet. Bought the stuff, and then I was like, okay, a friend asked for one. Sold it to him, but I handed him a flappy piece of leather that I had hand sewed. I was like, oh shit, I need packaging. And then next thing I'm like, oh, I have packaging, I need a logo. And then I'm like, oh, I have a logo, now I need to figure out how to make a website. You know, and it all spirals in every single thing. Like I'm a professional, and I was like, I didn't know about logos. You know, I didn't know about how much it costs to make this thing. There are all these things, and it's one of the best professional learning experiences I've had. And it was just because I bought too much leather to make one wallet. So just stay
Jason,
busy.
I must say that I love the name of your brand, of the wallet project.
Thank you.
It's an awesome name.
it's also dog themed.
What's the name, can I ask?
It's called Sidekick.
Sidekick.
As in a dog is a sidekick. Logo is also my dog's head. His name's Omar. Rachel brought him up because she didn't have anything relevant to us.
It just makes me think about the idea of having a side gig, you know.
Yeah, and that was part of it too. It was kind of like, what is this? This is my sidekick. This is my side gig. But yeah, it was just proof to see if I could do it. I ended up with a wallet and a portfolio piece, and it was, you know, it's those little things that are conversation starters and stuff like that. So I don't know, stay busy and keep your heads up.
Great advice right now during what's going on. That's great advice. Well, thank you. It's past our time. I
Sure.
want to say thank you, Jason. This was wonderful. I really gained a lot.
Thanks for the invite.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really enjoyed learning a little bit more about industrial design itself too, especially because, as I mentioned, the group at Wentworth is such a tight-knit group. And so I
Yeah.
always love hearing experiences. So I just want to say thank you. And I'm sure the rest of our group also appreciates it. And as I mentioned, I'd like to get some of those specific things you mentioned over email so we can blast it out to our audience here so they have some resources.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you coming. And again,
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, look,
Thank
Molly's
you.
holding up a
Thank you.
wallet. She's a customer.
have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.